Welcome to the Landscaping Podcast. My name is Joel Barnett and I am your host. And in today's episode, I'm talking with Andrew Christopher Dunne, an Irish landscape designer who also has started up a side hustle called the Garden Design Mentor, where he's helping out garden designers to not making the same mistakes that he made. So he'd been giving tips and advice on his Instagram page, which is an awesome follow because of that. So then he decided to formalize it and do a bit more of a course, even though it doesn't like calling it a course, to so they can help more people rather than just doing individual one-on-one. So it's well worth checking that out. And there's an insane amount of advice in this chat from him as well. Like there are things that I was listening to that I'm going to be changing. One of which is rocking up to a design appointment dressed more appropriately than in my normal landscape construction gear, but also thinking more about how the clients are thinking. So um, yeah, he goes into a bit of detail about that. So I'll let him explain that. But that was another great point. And he also spoke about how he changed the way he was thinking about designs when he stopped doing construction, because when he was doing construction and designing, he was thinking of designing things that he could build. But then once he stopped doing the construction, he could just design anything. So he had a lot more freedom and creativity. So that was a good point as well, and something that I know that I'm aware of that I do when we're doing designs. I think of how complex it would be to build or and change based on that. So yeah, it was a good episode for me to listen to. So hopefully you enjoyed it as well. This chat with Andrew Christopher Dunne.
I decided almost exactly a year ago to do one for garden design, or aimed at garden designers starting out in business. Because like there's this huge gap in knowledge between people that, what happens that you learn on a garden design course and the realities of running a business. I mean, it's chalk and cheese.
Mm.
And yeah, so I started writing a course there about a year ago in my spare time, and recording it. And yeah, I don't know, it took me 8 months or something like that to get around to do it, and a huge amount of work. And now I'm at the end of my year going, why have I got so much design work not completed? And I went, oh yeah, that's why.
Yeah, I reckon I was pretty similar to a year ago as well. It might have been a bit over, but I
Wow.
just haven't had any time to work on it for a couple of months because I'm sort
Mm,
of what I'm doing is I'm sort of building something and talking through it as I'm building it and filming it.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, I've actually just
Hugely
got to
time
get
consuming.
I've got to get real work done and get paid for, but then hopefully it
Yeah,
ends up working out all right. But yeah, there's
I think
so much time involved in it.
it's massive. It's absolutely huge. I mean, and also a learning curve, because when I was recording my course, it was I had to figure out, well, how do you run a course online? What platform do you use?
Yeah,
Oh, hang on a minute. What camera do I need to record it? What sound do I need? Oh, what's light? What the hell's a cob light? And now trying to figure out all these things, and then you go, all right, that's okay. So you do all that. Then there's the content, but actually the content wasn't as difficult because it's the stuff I think about 24/7 and have done for 25 years.
mm,
So the content wasn't that difficult. And the other thing is that I've been teaching people this stuff for years. Like I get phone calls and emails every single week from other garden design businesses saying, "Oh, listen, I wonder could you help me out? I'm trying to, get our first jobs, or we're really struggling with, dealing with this particular client. I don't know how to deal with this situation." And like, no problem. I'll explain that to people and I'll always do it. But then it just comes a point where you're kind of going, I'm getting all these requests for one-to-one mentorship where people are saying, yeah, could you just do a service and I'll pay you, no problem. Just, I need to talk to you about my business now. And I go, I don't have time for that, because really, my day-to-day job is, designing gardens and overseeing them, and it is full on. So then I decided, right, the only way I could really do this is maybe put it all down on paper, or better still, put it down on a course, but do it in a way, instead of doing a course, I don't even like the word course, but it's really just to be there as a mate, to turn around and say, well, listen, this is what you should do, and this is how you should do it, and this is how. And how do I know that? Because I've done it for 25 years, and these are all the things that I've done along the way that have made a difference. I think you'd know, and any landscaper who's run a business knows that there's an unbelievable amount of knowledge that you gain from doing. It's not anything that you learn in your landscaping course or your garden design course. It's what do you learn from actually getting out there and doing lots and lots of jobs, dealing with hundreds of clients, nice clients, difficult clients, dealing with other contractors and subcontractors, having them let you down, meeting somebody who's amazing that you learn from. Like there's so much knowledge there, and it took me 25 years to accumulate all that knowledge. But then you're going, well, hang on a minute. What if you're just starting out as a designer or even as a landscaper, and you haven't met the hundreds of people, you haven't made the terrible mistakes that you and I both made like a million times and paid for with our time, paid for with our sleepless nights, paid for with our actual money. Could we cut a lot of that out? And it got me thinking about like how hard it was when I started off and how I just felt like I knew nothing. Well, I knew next to nothing. It doesn't matter. I suppose I realized later on that most of the time when you're being taught by a design teacher or a horticulture teacher, they're probably teachers and they have left college, studied that, and been teaching it. There's very few of them have 20 years of experience and then went into teaching. So even the knowledge I was getting from courses wasn't that applicable to what I was doing. Yeah, it's just about putting all of that kind of stuff that you pick up along the way that you realize makes a huge difference to a business, and putting it all into one course. So that's really what I was trying to do. That's why I don't like the word course. It's more like that's why I said mentor. I hate it makes me sound like some kind of authority. I'm not really. It's more so just saying that I'm trying to be that guide that everybody, that you and I wished we had at the outset, where you had somebody turn around and say, this is fantastic. I don't know your background. Maybe you learned from your father or you learned from somebody else and generational, but most of us had to figure it out for ourselves. And if you look back on it and how difficult it was and how long that process takes, wouldn't it have been amazing if you had somebody to say, well, listen, if you're ever in this situation where a client's haggling about a price and you're thinking about dropping your fees, what should you do? Should you drop your fees? Should you stick to what your guns and maybe lose the job? Like I didn't know. We had to guess. And I suppose my mentor kind of course is about giving people enough knowledge that they don't have to guess anymore. That they go, oh, actually, that guy's done it for 25 years, and he's telling me straight. I'm not telling the kind of BS version of this is how a garden designer should work, and we should be walking around in our suits all day long and just telling everybody how fantastic we are, and all our minions will go around and create these beautiful gardens. That's nonsense. It's the reality of running a business. And one of the most amazing things I've realized over the years, and I think again anybody who's in business in this kind of game realizes that very, very often the things that make a difference in your business aren't the huge big things. Like a huge big thing in garden design is how good a garden designer you are. How beautiful are your end result gardens. You would assume that must be the be all and end all of everything, but it's not. And it took me a long time to realize that. You don't have to be the number one designer or the number one landscaper in the world to have a business that can support your family. Um, you have to be good, there's no doubt about that. But the things that make the biggest difference, and that where clients have come back to me and said, oh, that's why Andrew was so good. That's why I really enjoy that service. It's the small, small, small things. It's the how you conduct yourself with your clients, how you communicate with your clients, absolutely, vitally important. How you are, attentive to the smallest details, the tiny little things. I often tell the story about the difference of showing up on time, how that makes,
That's what I was
what
going to
difference that
say.
makes.
Yeah.
You see and you know what? The landscaping world, and I know lots of landscapers, they're all busy. A lot of them are on the tools and they have that mindset. And being on time is slightly down the list of 101 other things they have to worry about. And I'm trying to direct people back and say, oh, actually, forget about the other things you have to worry about. You said you'd be there at 8 o'clock. Be there at 8 o'clock. Now, and I used to take that to an extreme. So if I had a meeting with a client and I had to meet them at 8 o'clock in the evening, I would, look up in Google Maps. Look up in Google Maps. When I started off, there was no Google Maps. There was no Google. YouTube's like happened 2 or 3 years after. No, I think 5 years after I set up is when YouTube started that. So I'll give you an idea. But so I'd have to meet somebody at 8 o'clock. So what I would do is I'd find out where they lived, make sure I had plenty of time, arrive 20 minutes, half an hour early, and I'd drive past the house to make 100% sure that I got the right house. And then I would sit around the corner and I'd have a little think about, okay, what am I going to say? What am I trying to do? And then I would show up to the door 2 minutes to eight, or I would be pulling in the driveway 2 minutes to eight. I would be getting out of my car at 1 minute to eight. At, 10 seconds to 8 o'clock, I'd have my watch out and then just go bing. Now, that sounds ridiculous, right? And it is a bit ridiculous, but it left a lasting impression on so many of my clients, which is very, very funny because I'm late all the time in my real life, but in my professional life, I'm always on time. And those little things make an absolute massive difference. And there's lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of those things that culminate in a successful business, in a really good reputation. And you do that for long enough, these things make a difference. But if you're a garden designer and you're a garden designer starting out, you don't think about, the importance of showing up on time or the importance of listening to your client and not talking to them, listening to their problems. That's a massive one. Everybody wants to talk about how brilliant they are and how amazing they are. Whereas you realize the longer you're in the game, actually, you have to put yourself in your client's position. Your client wants you to solve their problems, and not only solve their problems, to take away your fears, take away their fears. So they may be anxious, and nobody new designers are focused on one thing: how good's my drawing going to be? Is my design going to be good enough? That's the only thing they think about. Is it going to be amazing? And they never for a second think, what's my client really worried about? Are they anxious about spending all this money? Do they trust me? Do they have doubts about this whole process? And when you start changing your focus from being all about you and how great you are and what an amazing garden designer you are and how many incredible projects you can do and how you're going to transform somebody's life. Instead, start thinking about your clients and flip everything on your head and think about their position. What are they thinking right now? They've never met you before. They probably don't know a whole lot about gardens. I mean, that's something I've definitely realized, and I know you'll have come across it. This anxiety about gardening and plants. I mean, it's understandable. I mean, it comes from quite an elitist position hundreds of years ago. That's where we all learned to garden. Everything is, ridiculously complicated Latin names, and not only that, you run the risk of killing things. I mean, that's a total fear of clients. Oh, we're going to kill all the plants. I don't understand any of them. Now, if you can take away all of their fears and say, well, actually, listen, don't worry about it because we're going to put the right plants in the right place. We're going to show you how to look after them. I'm going to give you a little document that's going to show you a photograph, not a Latin name. I'm going to show you a photograph of every plant, tree, hedge, shrub, bulb I put in your garden. And I'm going to just put a very simple bit of maintenance tip beside it. If you want to learn more about it, you can go Google it and get a PhD in perennial science all day long. But I'm telling you now, I'm just going to make it as easy for you as possible. And it's a game changer. It's an absolute game changer in the whole game. So that's me rambling away straight away. That's the opening gambit, Joel. It's up to you.
Well,
You all get a chance to talk.
I'm gonna edit that into the episode at some point. But yeah, couldn't agree with more. And I wonder whether I would have, if I had someone like doing a course or being a mentor in the early days, if I would have listened. Because yeah, so
Yeah,
there'd be like, I reckon, because in design there's a lot of people who do a career change and go into it. I reckon they will listen more. But I wonder whether
Yes.
the ones straight out of school are going to be would actually listen,
Yeah,
or they'll make the
that's
mistake and
it.
then they think, ah, I should have listened.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. It's certainly in design, huge amount of career change people, or even the people starting out in design. If you're straight out of school, there's very few will go into design. They'll go into horticulture or landscaping, and then maybe explore design. Very few, if any, will really go. I've just done my final exams. I want to study garden design. It's very rare. But at the same time, I think that's why it's really important the way you teach something. I mean, have you? I don't know. Do you get them in Australia? I'm sure you do. You see these maestro or maestro classes. They've got every celebrity known to man is doing this highly polished, glossy kind of presentation of a course, and you'll have everyone from Gordon Ramsay to, I don't know, whatever celebrity teaching you all about their skills. And they're beautiful courses and they're not expensive, but they're very glitzy. And the thing that I think makes a difference between what you and I would produce and what they would produce is that we're more on their level. If you're looking at a celebrity and you're trying to learn how they cook and they own, 25 Michelin starred restaurants around the world, they talk to you a particular way. And I think if you are somebody who's kind of been there and done that and used your hands and all the rest, and you can speak to people a particular way that interests them, and they're far more likely to listen. If you're not talking down to somebody, if you're talking at the same level as them, that is absolutely huge. I mean, it's great to have an authority behind you to say, look, yeah, clearly I have a body of work. I know what I'm talking about. But if you can do that and still talk in, plain English, that's how you make people listen. I'm convinced of it.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people like about this podcast when it first started was the people I had on there are very relatable. Like they're exactly the same as
Yeah,
them. So that's yeah,
yeah,
exactly like that. But yeah, we'll get stuck into it. I'll do the start and
yeah.
then I'll work out how to edit all that in later on. But
No
um,
problem.
Andrew, thank you for joining us on the landscaping podcast. My first question for you is how did you start in the industry?
How did I start in the industry? Well, it's a long time ago. I'm not sure if I can remember back that far, 25 years. But no, actually, I started as a landscaper, like many garden designers did. But even before I was a landscaper, I was a windsurf instructor down in the west coast of Ireland. I was doing that for a couple of years. I was a beach bum. Can you believe it? Imagine that. I had long hair down to my shoulders a long, long time ago. That'll tell you how long it was. But yeah, so I love the outdoors. I've probably been gardening my entire life. I had been gardening my entire life, but it never entered my consciousness that this was a career, even a possible career. So I just was kind of plodding through life. I've been working as a windsurf instructor for a couple of years, really loved it, but did come to the conclusion that, you know what, I'm never going to be able to afford a mortgage on doing this. I'm much and all as I love it, and it has a shelf life. So, I need to do something. So I came back to my hometown and I was trying to figure out what I would do in my life. Again, not even registering in my consciousness, I just got a job with a local landscaper. So I started working on projects, quite large projects. Now it turns out that yes, okay, I've been gardening my whole life, but I've also been making things and building things and doing all that kind of stuff. And within a year, I was kind of managing all the big projects for that landscape company. They really were quite a large company and they didn't really want to get involved in projects at all. So they kind of let me to it. I would get a drawing and we'd go, well, I need to interpret this. So I spent a lot of time talking to clients and figuring things out and getting stuff done. And then after a year, I didn't like the way that company was being run. I didn't like the way they were treating their clients in particular. And I said, I got to get out of here. And not only did I get out of here, I had to tell a couple of my clients, or their clients, should I say, that, listen, you're being had here. And turns out that I started doing small jobs for myself as a landscaper, and then very quickly I was getting calls from some of the previous people that I'd worked for and said, look, we heard you're not working for these guys anymore, but we really like the way you were working. Is there any chance you come back? And I spent a bit of time actually fixing up other people's work. I then did a course, start your own business course. Now, alongside I was doing horticultural courses, the RHS level 2 and 3 and all that kind of stuff. But I did a start your own business course. It was kind of a local enterprise office, and they had three lecturers in. One was based in business, one was based in marketing, whatever it was, one was branding. And there was maybe, I think there was 14 or 15 other entrepreneurs, if you like, working there. They were all different people. Some were electricians, some were carpenters, some were running a farm business. And we all learned the process of running a business. Now, of course, I had been thinking about it for years, thinking, what would I do in this? How would I do things different? So the course went on for about, I don't know, 12 weeks or something like that. And I, during this process, I've been talking about how I would do things differently, how I would, be a really good professional, how I kind of identify mistakes that were going to be made and how it's going to be better. And obviously, I talk a lot, but the net result was I ended up spending the first nearly 2 years of my career working for people who were on that course. The three lecturers, I did all of their gardens, and I think I did about six other gardens for people who were on that course. And that taught me a lot because it realized that actually, people weren't buying my gardens, my service. They were buying me. And people buy people. We know that phrase. And, that's all those years ago. And even today, I realize that's hugely important. People are still buying people. They don't want, just anybody to design their garden or just anybody to build it. They want somebody that they trust, that they can feel confident in. So I ended up starting a landscaping business, same as anybody else. I tell you a funny story. I had no money whatsoever, absolutely broke. I was living with my parents at the time, and the only thing I had of value was my surfboard, my windsurf board. So I decided to take the harsh decision to sell it. And I sold it at the time for £400, which I suppose is probably back then, probably about $800. And I then went and I registered my business. I bought my first mobile phone, which was a Nokia 3210. Can you
Yeah,
believe that?
I had one of them.
And you remember them? You couldn't kill these phones. There's two things that are going to survive a nuclear holocaust. It's going to be cockroaches and the Nokia 3210. What a phone. I think mine still is running on the same battery charge that I had from all the way back then. So anyway, I registered the business, bought a phone. Then I went down to the local market and I bought, I think I bought wheelbarrow, shovel. I remember buying a rubber mallet, a few other things because we used to do a lot of paving. And within a week, I'd made that money back. And within 2 weeks, I bought the surfboard back. So that kind of taught me, okay, maybe I'm onto something here. And I just I just pushed myself to ensure that every single project I did was just a little bit better and a little bit harder than the previous one. I didn't want to, I wanted to make sure I wanted to kind of progress. And I knew from the very, very earliest stages what I wanted to do was I wanted to work on big projects with good budgets that I could do something really interesting. So it was just a progression. So I ended up then I was designing the gardens alongside, and then after a while, I realized, you know what? Some clients are contacting me because they want a landscaper to build their garden, and then other clients are ringing me because they wanted a garden designer to design their garden. And I found that there were two different clients. The client who rang me because they wanted a garden designer, they wanted they had a particular idea of what a garden designer was. And then the same thing, and they also, I suppose they also maybe even thought about budget or the kind of style of the project. So in other words, I realized, okay, I either need to be a garden designer or I need to be a landscaper. So what I would do would be I would get a call from a person who wanted to see the garden designer, and the garden designer would show up and he'd be dressed nice, and I'd talk in and I'd be brought in and I said, would you like a glass of wine? And we'd discuss their garden, and yeah, no problem, that'd be fine. And then somebody else would ring me and they'd go, we need a landscaper to build the garden. We've had a bit of a design done, or we just, and I would show up in my van in my work clothes, and they got a landscaper. And it worked, and it was the psychology behind all of it. And I'm sure you still see that to this day, trying to bridge the gap where people don't understand, different roles, or even the capabilities of each roles. So I ended up running two business, a garden design business and a landscape business, completely separate. And I had two different websites. I had two very different sets of clients, but it was only me, and nobody knew, and that was fine. But eventually, after years of doing it, I realized, you know what, I'm gonna have to pick one, and I can't do everything. I was just getting spread too thin, and I made the decision based around. I kind of closed the landscaping business about 10 years ago, and just kept all my focus on the garden design business, and that was for a couple of reasons. One, the number one reason was that I knew that there was lots and lots of people who could build a beautiful porcelain patio. There was loads of them. And they might know nothing about plants, they might know nothing about design or any of those things, but you could get an awful lot of people who could build a patio, build a wall, and put in a lawn. However, there was only one person who could come up with my ideas for designs. Like, there's no other competition in that. Yes, there's other garden designers, but they're realizing their own ideas, but nobody's realizing mine. So I said, right, focus on that. And look, I haven't looked back since. The other reason, of course, was I know how hard it is to run a landscaping business. It's unbelievably difficult. It's crazy difficult. So you've got, apart from the fact that you've got a huge diverse set of skills that you need to have to build a garden. And I don't know what it's like in Australia. I suspect it's much the same as it is in Ireland. Landscapers try to do absolutely everything.
Yeah.
And, yes, we're horticulturalists. A landscaper is a horticulturalist. They will build a patio, they build a garden room, they build your house. You stand still long enough, they'll build you. It just we'll do it all, and you have to. And that requires, as well as that requires a huge amount of equipment. So you need lots of diggers, and I had them all. Like, I had 15 guys working for me at one point, and I had, all sorts of tools, equipment, and you got to this point where, okay, I'm running around like a lunatic. I'm running all of these projects. I've got all this amazing equipment. My clients are thrilled. My staff are delighted. They got a really good, they're working on really cool projects. My suppliers are delighted. Everybody's been paid. And then at the end of the week, you're going, well, the digger's broke. Another track's off the track machine. Gonna have to replace that. The hydraulics have gone. Van's broke down again. And you're going, I haven't made a penny. And there was many projects that I would have done because that maybe they ran over on time, or maybe they just took a bit longer, or something broke along the way, or we just miscalculated the amount of material we needed, and everybody else was delighted, but I'd worked harder than anyone, and I'd the least to show for it. So that was a big kind of, I know by the look in your face, Joel, you've been there too. I think every landscaper has been there, and you kind of accept that, you accept you win some and you lose some, but the rate of winning and losing is much improved when you're a self-employed designer. So my staff disappeared. I work with largely myself, but I have two remote staff who work with me, one based in Ireland and another one based in Slovakia. And between the three of us, we can do a huge volume of work. And at the end of the day, when I invoice for a project, I know where that money's going. I don't have vans, diggers, staff, suppliers, oh God, all that kind of stuff. It's a simpler business model. And it's the route I've chosen, for better or worse. I do sometimes miss getting out and building stuff, but not that much because I kind of got it out of my system. I got it out of I built huge amount of gardens with my own hands, a huge amount of projects, and I kind of have that out of my system. And I'm quite happy now to work with others and see that process come alive too. So
Yeah, I started getting more into design but probably 18 months or 2 years ago, and I was looking
yeah,
at it thinking, I don't understand why I would keep doing construction when it's so much easier to like there's so much less room for error in or there's more
mm,
room for error in doing design. Like in because
yeah,
all it's gonna do is take you a bit longer. But there's
yeah,
no none of these extra costs that come up when you're doing
no,
construction.
yeah. But the reason for that, I bet you know the reason why, it
But
seems attractive. But
well, it's
what's
a
the
lower
reality?
turnover as well.
Much lower to, yeah, and that's a big thing. I mean, I tend to do less than 10 designs a year. And they're big, complex
Yeah, right.
jobs. Now, although I'm doing maybe say 10 designs a year, or less in some cases, I aim to be doing about five if I could get away with it. But there's my projects are so large that there are projects at different stage. So in fact, I spent most of this year, my time this year was spent managing projects that I designed a year ago. And that's the reality of being a garden designer. So you're trying to move on and move forward, but you've got this process from designing a project. It then has to go to a landscaper. You have to source one first of all. You have to go through the whole pricing and budgeting, and then you're on the waiting list for the contractor. He could be 6 months. So then the project just gets started maybe a year later. Now imagine where you are mentally in your head with in a busy studio when you get a phone call, oh, we're starting on site, and that's a project that you designed a year and a half ago, and you're going, oh crikey, can you meet us? And spend the next 8, 9 months meeting them regularly. So that like most things in life, nothing is as straightforward as you think it is. It seems very appealing to go, oh, I'll just work in design and I'll cut out all of that headache of trying to run a landscape business. But try it. I mean, try to make enough income to support yourself and your family on designing gardens alone. It's really difficult. I mean, one, you've got to convince people to pay a lot of money for the design in the first place. Now, they're not going to do that unless you have a serious reputation and a lot of experience behind it. And you've got to be able to do the whole kind of designer thing, not just the landscaper thing. Clients are looking for something else. But you've got to get enough of those people. And bear in mind that if you are going to be working on one project for months and months and months, and maybe there's only 3 or 4 stage payments in that, you could have huge gaps where nothing comes into your house. Nothing comes into the home. And that is, to this day, is still probably one of my biggest issues. I'm much better at it. I've got very good clients, but you know, with the best contract in the world, clients pay when they want to pay. That's just the way it is. And with design, you have this perception around value, which is really important. So you get a landscaper to build a patio, no problem. The landscaper's at $10,000. I'm going to do your patio, no problem. And at the end of that job, the client has a beautiful big patio out in the back garden worth $10,000. I could charge $30,000 to design a garden, and at the end of it, a client has that's what a client has. They have a series of drawings. They have, digital renders. They have paper essentially. Now, so the value perception around that is, you've got to convince somebody that your ideas, what you contain in those drawings, is worth $30,000, and they don't have the garden yet. So it's a lot harder than you might think. I think a lot of landscapers will go into design and then they'll do this kind of thing. Oh yeah, we'll design your garden, and you know what? We include the design for free, and if we build a garden, now that has so many problems attached to it. So first of all, it's not free. because there is nothing free. It has to be included into the cost of their garden. So are you being disingenuous to your landscape clients now? Are they really paying for a design that they thought was free and it's just included in your landscaping? And then you have the other issue of, hang on, I have actually designed this garden and it's a really good design, but am I getting paid properly for the design? Well, only if I build a garden and the garden goes well and I don't lose money on it. So like what I advise all landscapers would be, okay, if you're going to design, do it like I did. Set up two different businesses. It's not that complicated. Say, okay, we have a design department, and you can use our design department, and we will prepare a design. Here's the fees for it, and you can still be very competitive on your prices for it, but try and separate the two, even if it's just you, even if you're the same person. But there's so much psychology in business that you have to be aware of. And so if you're able to charge separately for your designs and say, look, this is our garden design fee, or if really work with a garden design company and put yourself in a position that if that job doesn't go ahead, it doesn't bother you either way. You've won either way. You've won the design. You've got enough money to cover the design. You're not going, okay, I'm kind of subsidizing my design fees because I hope to get the project. Now it opens up a whole new world to you then that you're going, hang on, that means that actually, yeah, if we build the garden, that's fantastic. If we design it, that's still good. If we design it and somebody else build it, it still works. So you're kind of opening up your repertoire of skills that you can do. And most landscapers won't do that. They'll kind of go, well, we kind of blended one in with the other, and you're getting a bit of a deal. And sure, if I lose money on the design, it's fine. And that's why they can't get the bigger fees for the design end of things. And it's also confidence. Their confidence lies in the building side of things. They probably come from that practical end of things, and the design thing, comes from this is somebody who's, you know, they're in college and they've done this, that, and the other, and they're not my people. And you realize, that's a crazy mindset to have. And landscapers have like so much to offer even from a design point of view. They have so much knowledge, but it has its limitations too. I mean, I remember when I was designing gardens as a landscaper that I knew I had to build everything I did, which was great. I got to understand everything and I have a great sort of background and knowledge of my gardens, but it also limited me. It used to limit me in, I wouldn't design something that I didn't 100% know how to build. And that was a strange thing to say, but I will often design things that I don't fully know how to build. So if you don't have to build the garden, it frees you up creatively to be a little bit more creative and not just be producing the same garden again and again in different sort of formats. So what I will do is I go, okay, now what would be amazing here? Oh, I want to do something really cool. Okay, I want to design, I think we're going to do a set of stables. We're going to do a set, the client's mad into horses. They want me to design a set of stables. I know nothing about horses. What am I going to do? Well, I'll design it, and then I'll find the people who know these things, and I'll find the contractor who can understand what I'm trying to produce, or I'll find the expert, and then all of a sudden it's not just my skill set that my designs rely on. I've got a whole world of people to deal with, and that's opened up so much creative possibility for me, but it's also opened up amazing connections and relationships with other people, with other landscapers, with designers, with artists, sculptors, subcontractors, and if you realize that everybody that you deal with, absolutely everybody has, a set of skills. They have a history of knowledge, they've all that kind of stuff. And if you can tap into that, it's fantastic. Listen to everybody and you can do so many different things. So that's what
Yeah,
I'm
that
up to.
like you said earlier, a landscaper does too many things. Like they can do everything, but it's a
Yeah.
lot better when you can work as part of a team, and you've
Yeah.
got people who are specialists in what they do. You're going to get a better result.
Yeah, exactly. And I suppose, I mean, you look at the building industry. We have a huge building boom in Ireland at the moment because we have uh, we're seriously short of houses. And so there's houses being built everywhere, and they're generally in the format of huge housing estates with, three or four hundred houses in each one of them. Now, I always assumed, well, that's 1,000 builders building all of them, a huge company. Until I got to know a couple of my friends are builders, are developers, and you look at the core of it. There's three guys run the whole thing. And I'm going, how's the three people? I mean, you're building 500 houses. Well, we've subcontractors. So we've bricklayers, we've grounds workers, we've sparks, we have carpenters, and you go, and we just manage it. And so look at, I think what a lot of landscapers could really do, certainly when they get to a certain level and they get that little bit bigger, is look at the subcontractor route. I mean, a landscaper will do all of these brilliant things. They can be a carpenter, they can do, block laying, the whole lot. Now, put the best landscaper up against a guy who's been laying blocks for 40 years. You kick your ass. I don't care what anybody says. They will always be better because they do nothing else but that. And same with even a joiner, a carpenter doing look, us as landscapers will do beautiful work. But then you see a joiner comes in and he does this all day long and you go, oh man, that is nice. And I think, yeah, budget has a lot to do with that. But I suppose landscapers, first of all, think, well, we haven't got enough budget to get all of these people in. So we're going to do it all themselves. And I said, okay, that's fine on really small projects. But as things get a little bit bigger and you're trying to do everything yourself, you're also you're also taking on all the risk yourself. So if you, rather you saying, okay, I'm pricing a $200,000 project, all the risk is mine, we have to do everything. Well, I'd look at that project and I'd say, okay, well, we've got a lot of woodwork in this. I've got a subcontractor who's a joiner. He's taken all of that and he's priced that. Now he has taken all that risk out of it because if he doesn't do it on the price he has set, that's his problem. It's not yours. If it took him a week longer to do it, he's already agreed the fees. That's his problem. And you just have to put that markup on your subcontractor, and you know that you're onto a winner. And you do that with all your other ones, and then maybe you know the landscaper is focusing on landscaping, the traditional landscaping, the horticultural side of things, which nobody understands other than the landscaper. But because we try to do everything, I think it's a hard one to call, but it seems to be the way to go when you get onto the larger project, and you'll also end up with a much higher standard of project and move away from what we would call the kind of the budget landscaper. We're doing absolutely everything on it to the real professional company. They go, wow, that is so good. That is really really nice. And if I always see it this way, that your landscaping should, the quality of your landscaping should match the house. It should be as good as everything in the house, that up to that standard. It's only then where you can get this situation where, you know, try to change your client's mindset. They don't have a house and a garden or a house with a garden wrapped around it. What I try to get into my client's head is to say, well, no, what you have is a property. You know, you have a property, and a property is everything on your site. It is the entrance gates on the way in. It is all the beautiful gardens at the front. It is the house. It's the paintings on the wall. It's the furnishings you put in. It's the view. That's your property. And what we need to do as designers and as landscapers is to get our clients to see their home as a property and say, look, we're going to make the whole thing this one unit that works together seamlessly. When you walk out the front doors or out the back door, it all just flows. It works really, really well. And, you know, that's such a good thing because I mean that's the way all good gardens and design should work. If there's a house involved, there's this kind of seamless flow from inside to outside, particularly important in Australia. But also, if you can get around that mindset, and get your clients to start thinking about a property, then their perception of value changes completely. They're not thinking, oh, we've a bit of a nice to have garden outside, so we're going to put our garden budget into our landscaping. Now, if you think about it as a property and you're roping your garden in with the value of the house, then all of a sudden you go, well, actually, do you know what? It's worthwhile spending a little bit more money, and because this is all working really well together. And then the perception of what a client is going to put into their garden changes completely.
Yeah. Yeah, it's about having that different mindset and trying and sort of learning that you need your client to understand that. And like that's what you teaching in your course, I assume, is getting to think how the client's going to be thinking, so then you can steer them in the right direction like that.
Well, that's it. We're so often thinking about ourselves in business. We're thinking about, as a designer, you're thinking, how good are my designs? Are they good enough? Are my drawings right? Am I amazing enough garden designer that justifies my fees? You do all of that, and you're walking in thinking, I need to tell people how great I am. I need to show them all the designs I've done. I need to convince them, I'm really talented and I'm going to be different to everybody else. Well, you don't actually. What you need to do is you need to think, well, hang on, what's my client thinking right now? Not just what are they thinking about me, but what are they thinking in general? They're thinking, okay, we finally making this move where we want to get some landscaping done. We want to have our garden designed. This is a big deal for us. So this is a lot of money, and it's hard-earned money. And should we, what a lot of landscapers don't consider is going, do you ever think to yourself when you go up to a project that your landscaping is equivalent probably to a brand new car, very nice new car? And that client might go, well, do we want a new Mercedes or do we want a new garden? And like if you were to put that side by side with each other, which one would you pick? Genuinely, I know which one I'd pick. And so if you start thinking that, hang on a minute, yeah, a client has legitimate concerns about why they're spending all this money, what they want, and they're probably nervous, they're probably afraid of all the plants, killing all the plants, their complete lack of knowledge in the field. So once you start putting yourself in a client's position instead of your own, then it's a game changer because your clients respond to that so well. I mean, one of the first things I teach any of my students would be, okay, on your initial meeting with your client, you are going to be so excited, especially when you're starting out in business. You are going to be wanting to, show how passionate you are about gardens, show how passionate you are about design and explain all that. I say, no, do none of that. Walk in, meet your clients, introduce yourself, and then just listen. Ask them, a couple of probing questions if they're getting stuck, but really just listen to them. And I do it to the point where it almost gets uncomfortable. That, the client, I'm asking the client, can you show me your garden? Is there anything you're looking for? And I haven't really given them anything. And they're sitting looking at me going, and we're thinking about doing this. And I say nothing, but you keep on going. And then there comes a point when they really have explained all of their fears, all of their concerns, all their desires and dreams. And then you say, okay, well, here's how the process works. And, here's some general things that we could look at and think about. But in that process, when I finally do start talking, I recant points from a half an hour ago when I met them first, when they said, okay, well, one of the things we're worried about is, we have young kids here and we want them to play football. And, is the landscaper, is the designer going to, put plants everywhere and ruin our kids' childhood? So I start just demonstrating to them for that first half an hour that I was listening to them. And I remember the key points of what they said. And I identified it mentally. I was thinking in my head, what's something they really would like? But more importantly, what's the things they're nervous about? They're worried about. And I hit those kind of key points. And then all of a sudden, a client goes, oh, he was listening to me completely. I thought he wasn't listening at all. But he is listening and he's taking it all in and he's noted it. And very often then when I'm sending my tender out to clients, I will have noted those same things again, saying, look, we'll develop the brief as we're going along, but I do note that these are, 4 or 5 points that we need to look at. And that changes the game. So the client is now thinking, okay, this is all about me. This whole service, this person's doing everything for me. It's not about them. And they're more confident, they're more trusting. And when they're more trusting, look, you have an easier job, apart from one thing. You're not being second guessed every 5 minutes. And you're also going to get the budget that you need. And very often when you go into any client, you know, I'd never ask the client, what's your budget? Never, because I think it's kind of a silly question to ask somebody. If I walk into somebody today and I say, okay, what's your budget for a garden? And they say, okay, we have $50,000. And, but I asked to myself, what's in their mind of what a garden is? Like, what's their reference point for their $50,000? And my reference point is something completely different because I've been doing this for so many years. And so they may be thinking $50,000 for a garden. You'd go, God, that's not worth $20,000. Whereas in my head, I know I could do a garden that's going to be, unbelievable. And the client, you show them that project and they go, well, actually, you know what? We said 50,000, but we didn't think you'd come up with anything as incredible as this and life changing. And all of a sudden they've got $100,000. So if you, again, that's thinking from the client's point of view. If you're thinking from the client's point of view and how they even decided their budget, that's the other thing. A better way I deal with it is I will say to clients, well, look, we'll have some general discussions around budget. You can't be stupid about these things. But I would say at the concept stage, let's design the perfect garden for you. Like if you have the time and if you had the budget, what could we do in your garden that would be really perfect for you and your family and for this site? And let's look at that. And then let's get it costed. And then let's reverse engineer it from there. So, we design the garden, we get over the hump of, what it could be. Because again, budget, if it's number one focus, budget, 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 and you're trying to be creative and do something good, it's not going to work. It just won't work. You'll be going, oh, I can't do that, can't do that, can't do that. That's not going to work. So you design something that's going to be really amazing, that a client's going to love. And then I go to a contractor or a series of contractors and I get them to price up that project. And then, inevitably it's going to come in 15, 20, 30% over budget. And then I'll look at that project and I'll go, okay, well, no problem. The client may go, well, we love this design and we're prepared to pay a bit more, but we're not going to pay all that. And I said, no problem. Well, instead of those huge, big Italian trees that we wanted to put in, we're going to buy much smaller ones. We're going to wait 5 years and you're going to get the same thing. We're going to phase out the project. We're going to do and phase 4 is when you put in, the beautiful sculpture that you wanted. But in the meantime, we're going to do all these other things. And you reverse engineer it and you get to a point where at the end of the design process, you have a set of drawings that a client absolutely loves, like a garden they're delighted with, on a budget that they're really comfortable spending. So if you put all that work in before anybody has started digging holes in your back garden, you can see how the projects all of a sudden start running so much more smoothly, as opposed to the landscaper who will go in and start working on a job, then kind of half hoping that maybe it'll grow legs and we'll get a little bit more out of it, or halfway through the project where the client says, oh, can you do this bit here and you can do that, and that just, yeah, you do it, but it throws your schedule out of whack, and it screws with everything. Whereas if the luxury, and it is a luxury, the luxury of going to the detail of design that I do is that we have full control of the project and a full understanding of it before anybody arrives on site. And the projects then run so much smoother. So to give you an idea, I will produce typically on a project, a book like this, we'll have digital renders. So I'll have maybe, depending on the size of the project or complexity, 50 or 60 images easily. Some of the big projects have more. And I can show the garden from every angle. I can show the view looking out the kitchen window. I'll also produce maybe a 5 or 6 minute digital animation, a walkthrough. So the clients can see their car driving up the driveway, they can look all around, they can recognize their house. All of that is just the concept stage. It takes a phenomenal amount of work. But the reason I put all that effort into the concept stage is because I understand the clients don't understand gardens. They don't might understand the house, but they don't understand gardens. There's not enough reference material out there to look at. There's not enough people that you know who could honestly tell you. I don't know what it's like in Australia, but in Ireland, nobody will tell you what they spent on their garden ever. So a neighbor would somebody could have spent hundreds of thousands of euro on a garden, but they'll never tell anybody what they spent on it. So it's very difficult then for any client to have any idea of what a budget should be because they don't have a reference material. They can't turn around. It's probably a bit easier in Australia because the outdoor lifestyle is so important. But in Ireland, if there's very few really good top end gardens in Ireland, there's not that many. And if you were lucky enough to know the people, they're all behind closed doors. And if you knew somebody and you got to see with these gardens, they won't tell you what they paid for it. So where's anybody's reference point when they meet me first and they go, we've all these ideas for a garden, but we've no idea what it costs. And it costs a hell of a lot more than they think it does.
Well, I
So
assume
that's why I do.
you would have
Sorry?
you'd have TV shows that build gardens and say how much they cost, but that also includes a lot of sponsorship, so it doesn't actually cost what they say it costs, and that gives them a
Yeah, exactly.
representation.
Exactly. And we have actually in the last number of years, the TV shows have well, they've declined massively. There's not as many of them out there. Even there's home building ones where they might rope in a bit of landscaping with it. They'll talk about the cost of them, and like you're sitting there going, "What are you talking about? There's no way you got that for that. Like that's 4 times less than it should be." And that's really problematic because and then worse than that we have like a TV show kind of competition that goes on one called Super Garden here where they take amateur designers to design a garden and then they're producing they've got a budget and they're doing this. Well, there's two problems with it. The quality of what they're producing because they're amateurs isn't up to where it should be by any standard, and then the budget that they say they built it on is totally unrealistic. So maybe they say, okay, we've 20,000 euro. And I go, okay, but who built it? Oh, we built it for free. And I got my father to help me, and all my family got roped in. And I go, okay, yeah. And then what insurance did you have? How much did you pay for insurance? How much did you pay for vans? Do you pay VAT? That's our tax. Do you have staff? Do you have a pension plan for your staff? Like how much do they pay for the design? How much would you value your design for? Oh, if maybe would have done a design for $800. Yeah, a professional design for that should have cost $15,000. So, it's totally unrealistic. And then you go walking around meeting clients and say, well, we have a budget of 20,000 because we saw this one on telly, and you're looking at, nope,
Yeah.
not going to happen. Not going to happen. So that's quite difficult. We just do all of that kind of detail in our concepts just to communicate what's possible. But then we'll go and do a huge amount of construction drawings for everything, every last little detail, even if it's a patio. That a landscaper's built 50,000 times. I'll still have a drawing for how it should be built because every landscaper will do it slightly different. But it's a game changer. I think if I know a lot of my contractors who build the gardens now, they love it because it's the first, it's one of the few projects they actually work on where they have proper drawings. Most landscapers have a drawing, if they're lucky, one drawing, or maybe, a concept drawing and, a basic set out. And then they have to make up the rest themselves, which gives you a certain amount of freedom, but at the same time, very difficult to price the job over that. Who's really pricing what? And how can you be competitive then if I handed 2 drawings out to 10 landscape contractors, they're all going to have very, very different prices when they come back. So the theory being when you offer that much design detail, that if I handed them out to 10 contractors, they should come in largely the same if they've looked at the drawing. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
You recently changed your Instagram because I discovered you on Instagram because there was I didn't see how many views it got, but I reckon they must have done one that did a lot of numbers because you were just giving out some great advice, and then I saw that's what you do a lot on your page, and you've recently changed the handle to the Garden Design Mentor because of all the great advice, and I've had other people mention how you were talking about pricing and that sort of thing and how great it was. So when did you start sharing your advice on there?
Well, I suppose the funny thing was I was sharing my advice for years to anybody who had asked. I mean, I just look at everybody does it. Every landscaper would do the same thing. Help somebody out. Help the little guy, who's just starting out. Give them a few pointers. But over time, this was starting to become very, very common. To the point of, hang on a minute, this is starting to take up a bit more time than I really needed to do. I would get emails and phone calls, one a week, one or two a week, from somebody saying, "Look, could you could you talk to me for an hour? Could I meet with you and have a chat? Because I'm starting a business and I don't know what I'm doing, and or I'll pay you, no problem." And I'm going, look, I don't want to be paid for that. And but then I realized, hang on a minute, I can't do this constantly. I have a very busy practice. Is there anything else I could do? So I thought, okay, well, I'll start maybe giving out advice to other people, help them out and see how it goes. I suppose one of the we talked a bit about change of mindset, but my Instagram page for years, the mindset was again all about me. It was about how beautiful my gardens are. Look how great I am. Look at all these wonderful things I've done. And I just decided to do what I do in my own business. Don't make it about me, make it about other people. And that works in my business, and it works very much on Instagram too. I make it about other people, other designers in particular. I have a particular interest in helping out landscapers and designers, but I would have a lot of gardeners and keen gardeners following me as well. But the idea is to kind of give some of that knowledge out there and what I've learned along the way, not just the big things, but the really small things that have made a huge impact. So I eventually decided, okay, well, what if I did an online course? And I spent the last 8 or 9 months in my so-called spare time editing and recording and putting different pieces together. Some of it shot in Bewley House, which is this beautiful country house that I'm based in. It's like a 270-year-old country house. And then some just in my studio talking to people on this level, straight, no BS attached. What do you need to know? And put it together, and it's got a huge response. I actually have several people from Australia who have bought the course,
Yeah,
which
I'm
is
not
amazing
surprised.
because, well, it's really good because I think, here's you and I, we're what, 10,000 miles away from each other, and we've got this great commonality. There's so much we have in common because the truth is that the running a business side of things, the stuff you learn along the way, it's universal. It applies to everybody, and it doesn't matter whether you're in Australia or whether you're in the States or whatever, whether you're in Ireland, the same sort of skills apply. One of the reasons for that, by the way, not one of the reasons for that, but an interesting kind of link is that one of the first jobs I ever had, I think I was about 15 or 16. I was working in my uncle's cafe. It was like a diner for truckers. And it was a great place because it was a really busy place. And you would have all the guys from the trucks would come in, they pull in, they'd have their food. But, the big motorway wasn't built beside us. So everybody came by this diner. And you would have truck drivers, you'd have families, you'd have politicians, you'd have rich business people, you have down and outs trying to get a bite to eat. And I dealt with them all at 15 or 16. And the skills I learnt in that job have translated, 30 years later to what I'm doing now, and I use it all the time. One of the most important ones is communication. Can you communicate with anybody at any levels of society? Well, first thing to realize is to hell with level of society. everybody's the same. They're all humans. We all have the same fears. Treat everybody the same, and you get a huge response from it. So I try to apply that into my course, and what I teach is to teach everybody the same. And probably one of the most the course is fundamentally about teaching you how to be a professional in whatever you do. Even if you're a landscaper or a garden designer, how can you be more professional? It's aimed very much at garden designers, but I actually have a lot of landscapers doing the course because they've enjoyed what they've heard on Instagram. They can relate to it, and this is just basically more of the same in a huge amount more detail than you can go into in 90 seconds on an Instagram reel.
Yeah, there's one thing you already said that made me think about changing the way I do something, and and it's partially because I've thought about it already. But I go like we were doing design appointments, and I had a landscape architect, so we'd both go to the appointment, and because I do construction, I was there in the work I do construction in, and I'd rock up in my truck, and yeah, and she's wearing nicer clothes, and now I'm just there, just a mess because I'm going back to the job site afterwards. Whereas I hadn't had like, and there were times I thought about it, like thinking maybe I should dress a bit nicer for the design consultations. And
Yeah,
I'm trying to get in, like you want to get into doing design consultations with people who's going to spend more money. So if
yeah.
I want to get up into those areas, then I need to change that. So yeah, so I'm another landscaper who's interested in it as well because there's a lot to learn.
Yeah, it's look, it goes against the grain of us to put on good clothes and present ourselves, and we're uncomfortable with it because we're most happy covered in shit and working away and doing our stuff. That's our comfort zone. But part of being in any business is getting out of your comfort zone and realizing that you can do it. I think confidence has a lot to do with it. A lot of landscapers went into landscaping because they didn't feel confident enough to go into some other realm of work. It was like we nearly fell into landscaping. And it's a mistake because landscapers have so much knowledge, so much experience, and they could be great designers. They do need to, you can very often spot a garden that has been designed by a landscaper and one that's been designed by uh, a garden designer. And one of the reasons for that is that the landscaper is designing what he knows. They're he or she, should I say? They are designing what they know. They know these building techniques. They know that's going to work because they've done it before, and that's what they build. A designer can be a little bit more creative and a little bit freer, and they can say, well, okay, we can do a little bit more. There's also tends to be with the landscapers this imbalance, too much hard landscaping, not enough soft landscaping due to lack of plant knowledge. And I would encourage any landscaper, look, if this is happening to you, if you're producing these gardens that have, just hard surfaces everywhere with a few little of the same plants you've used 50,000 times already, you know what? Find somebody else. Find a gardener. Forget a garden designer, whatever. Find a really good gardener and talk to them. Get them working with you on your plants, and then you're gonna have better and better gardens and produce better stuff. So, yeah, it's a funny thing, the perception of what a designer does and what a landscaper does and how they present themselves. Uh, it's probably one of the first things I say in my course. It would be, you know, if you are a garden designer, be a garden designer. Don't be a landscaper. If you're a landscaper, be a landscaper and do all that. Now, so if you're going to go down the design route of things, walk in and present yourself well. I used to do stupid things, and I say stupid things, they're not stupid. They seem stupid at the time. I would make a point of, okay, if somebody wanted to meet me, I might have been free today, but I'd say, no, I'll meet you in 3 days' time. And because I'll meet you in a week's time because I'm really busy. So straight away the client's thinking, oh, this guy's in demand. Very simple thing to do. The other thing I'd do is I would clean the car. My car would be clean. And I would, wouldn't, I'd dress neatly and I'd prepare myself and I'd show up. And when the client answered the door, they saw a garden designer. Now, I was a landscaper at the time. I was building gardens too, head to toe in muck, but they saw a garden designer. And again, if you realize the psychology behind it, that you know, clients are thinking certain things. They're making judgments. You shouldn't make judgments, but they do. Get used to it. Landscapers make plenty of judgments too. We walked into those houses, looked at their car and went, yeah, this ain't gonna be a job. This ain't happening. So we all do it. Let's just be honest about it. But something I'd encourage landscapers to do as well is to think about how you present yourselves to your clients initially. We've all done it. As a landscaper, you're running from one job to the next. Yeah, I'll call around and meet you. You swing around in the work gear, your yellow vest is on, and you talk to people. And that client now has a perception of you all the time. Now, if a landscaper shows up and they're dressed well and they say, okay, yeah, look, this is what we can do. Well, maybe the client is thinking, God, is this guy a landscaper at all? And you go, well, hang on. Then you start showing them work and you start showing them your expertise and what you can do. And they go, wow, not only is this dude a landscaper, he's the most professional landscaper I ever met in my life. I want them. Fantastic. And you're able to show, you're able to show yourself in your work gear, you're able to show yourself in the professional side of things. And that's what a client wants. They want somebody who has the skill set that could fix all their problems in their garden, but they want that professionalism. And I think in landscaping, a lot of the time in Ireland, I don't know what it's like in Australia, but in Ireland you can have a lack of the professionalism of in the landscaping side of things. They may be brilliant at building stuff, but just can't talk to anybody, can't communicate. I've had an instance with this recently where I've had a landscape contractor who was really good at building, built on a phenomenal garden, over €500,000, beautiful project, but was a terrible communicator. So for the 8 months of the project, my client was on the phone to me every single day, terrified that something was going to go wrong. They were a nervous client in a way, but they were constantly worried. They were constantly stressed. And it was all because the landscaper wasn't communicating what he was doing. Yourself as a landscaper, you could spend hours and hours or days doing subterranean work where you're putting in drainage systems and all that. Client comes home from work, goes, this guy's done nothing for 3 days. Yeah, because it's all underground and it's really expensive to do. And so if the landscaper had communicated that, wow, game changer. You've explained to them, listen, we're going to sort out not only your garden, but we see your drainage system is not working here. We're going to fix that here. And I'd have landscapers who would be fixing these things and not tell their clients and go, that's a big mistake. So all of these things are really important. And I don't care whether you're a garden designer or whether you're a landscaper or a gardener. If you can bring that professionalism into the game and just don't feel shy about it. You are a professional. Just be that professional. It's a game changer because you'll elevate your entire business. One of the most common questions I get asked from garden designers is, how do you get those bigger projects? How do you get phenomenal? We do some great projects. Now, how on earth do you get them? And well, you get them by being a professional. That's it more than anything else. Like super, super on top of being a professional. You're showing up on time, you're communicating really well, you're not just delivering a design to a client. That's a really important thing. You're delivering an experience, the experience of dealing with you. I mean, I hark back to when I did an initial Start Your Own Business course, and I spoke to the lecturers about they asked me, why was I going to be different from everybody else? And at the time, my main frame of reference wasn't even landscapers, it was builders and the building industry. I said, I don't want to be roped in with all the builders. And they would say, well, why don't we want to be roped in? Because builders have a reputation for never answering their phone, for not showing up on time, for being halfway through a project looking for extra money, and everybody saying, oh look, we built an extension or we built a house and it was a nightmare, it was really stressful, and it was a headache and cost more than we want, but we love the house is great. I'm going, well, could you not just skip to the good bit, as they say? and produce the really good end result without all the BS beforehand. So don't have it cost more, price it right in the first place. Don't have it take longer, make your estimates realistic. Instead of it being a big mucky mess all over the place that stresses out my clients, be 100% conscious of what your client is thinking. I think, you know what, every day I'm going to clean up this site 10 minutes before my client arrives home. And every day I'm going to wash down this patio. I know I'm going to make it dirty tomorrow, but I'm just going to do it. All right. All of these things, if you do that, the small things, and you do them consistently over a long period of time, the big projects will come. They always will. If you do do everything the way you would do anything. And I think that's probably the best piece of advice. Do everything the way you would do anything. It doesn't matter whether you're doing a 1 million euro project or whether you're fixing a sewer pipe, and you're hanging upside down in a trench. You're still going to do it to the same care and attention. You're going to do it as good as you possibly can. If you multiply that through everything you do, you can't fail.
Yeah, that's great words. I just wanted to touch on your experience at Board by a Bloom as well, because I did you did
Yes.
mention before that you stopped construction like 10 years ago, and I think that was the first year. 2014 was the first year you did one there. So have you built
Yeah.
all of yours or have been involved in the construction of all your gardens there?
So the very first one I did in 2014, I built every last little bit of it myself,
Yeah.
every little bit. And that was an experience to say the least. But it was a game changer for me from the point of view that, I was going in there as a garden designer and as a landscaper, but I produced this garden that, was hugely well received. And I realized, God, maybe actually I'm better at this than I thought I was. So that was when I kind of flipped things around. After that, I've done another three large show gardens after that, kind of 2 years apart, a lot of them. And with those, I worked with another company, Silverstream Landscapes, and what kind of a again, I suppose I come from a landscaping background, so I'm very focused on these things, but I have learned over the years to start relinquishing a little bit of trust over to other people and using their skill sets and saying, look, they can do it better. I know that every single garden and every single plant I planted by myself on my hands and knees in the garden. That's one of the gardens I think had 8,000 plants in it. They were all me on my hands and knees, covered in crap. But then when the show opens, on with the good clothes and the garden designer again. So I like to get involved with them. I think when it comes to show gardens, you have to be there. If you think you're going to be a garden designer and rock up, a week later during the buildings and swan around and go, oh yes, that looks great. Oh, I want to change that. That's no, come on, you're not going to do well. I needed to know every last little detail of what was going on. Long before any of the projects were built, I was driving, an hour and a half down the road into the steel fabricators, supervising every millimeter of the projects and just making sure that, uh, you know, realizing you got to let people do their thing and you got to let the landscape contractor get loads of satisfaction out of this project. That's a really important thing working with the landscape contractors, but also remembering that you are solely responsible. Like if this doesn't do well, I'm not going to go around and whinge at the landscape contractor. It's my fault. I didn't sort it out in the first place. But I work with a really good landscape contractor and really good team, and also not just the landscape contractors. Maybe the landscaper might take some elements of it, and then other elements I say, no, I'm going to handle this myself. Maybe the sculpture, the artwork things, I'm going to deal with that. That's all. If you're maybe the furnishings, look, it's not your bag. I'm going to deal with it. And in Ireland, to do a show garden, a large show garden, the budgets are far too tight. They're just not right. I mean, if you compare that to just across the water with Chelsea, so the format of Bloom is identical to what they do in Chelsea. In fact, it was set up by Andrew Wilson and Mark Gregory from Chelsea over the format of what they use. So it's kind of the same judging format, it's the same structure. The big difference is the budget is about, it's about 20% of what it would be over there. So I might say I build a show garden for 100,000 euros. It would be 500,000 euros in the UK, and plus or minus. So you end up doing this really fun thing, which is beg, borrow, and steal. So you're trying to produce, you might have gotten maybe you got 100 grand to do your show garden, but you want to produce something that looks like it's 500 grand. How the hell do you do that? Well, you do a lot of different things. You might do some product placement. You might, very often I would have convinced furniture suppliers to supply something or work with nurseries. You borrow stuff, whatever you can borrow. Yeah, you steal stuff if you have to do that, whatever. But it works in the end, it's good fun. But we had some good adventures doing these projects. I mean, we've done some pretty crazy things. We did a garden once for our in 2018 for Bordí Ski. Good luck pronouncing that. That's the it's the Irish Fisheries Board, and they wanted to do a garden that was all about promoting the sustainability of fish, of farmed fish, farmed salmon.
Yeah, I
And
love
like,
that one. That's the one with the sculpture of the fish.
yeah, it
Yeah,
was
that
it
looks
was the one with the
amazing.
big boat in the middle of it. And
Yeah.
so like a client of mine, and I saw that kind of brief coming in, and I went, that's ridiculous. How can you promote fish in a garden? Like, that's not my bag. That's somebody else's kind of theme thing, and I don't want to do it. But then I was going for a walk down in my locality here beside me. I live by the sea, and it's beautiful kind of coastline. And I was walking over the coast, and like, I absolutely love it here. It's all wild and rugged and very Irish. And I thought, for years I've been thinking I'd love to do a show garden that had that kind of Irish feel about it. But I couldn't see how it would marry with my kind of contemporary design ethos. And then I thought, God, maybe I can do this project. So I had this idea, which was basically to create a garden that looked like an Irish port. If you go all around Ireland, there's loads of these small little ports, fishing ports, and you might have a big old stone pier, and you'll have a boat in it, and that's what it. So I said, yeah, I could do something like that. I'll just buy a boat, and I'll whack it in an overgrown pond. And I wanted to have people cooking in it because it was also promoting seafood. I'll just put a barbecue in it, be great. And then, of course, after a while, I realized it wasn't going to be quite that straightforward. So I ended up buying three separate boats and ripping them all apart. One was an old River Thames police boat that like an 80-year-old man in Donegal had. We bought it off him, and he drove it. He brought it down himself. This 80-year-old man brought us his old police boat from London. And then I had another part of a trawler, and then a neighbor of mine I actually live in a fishing village. Neighbor of mine gave me this wheel, an old fishing wheel. Anyway, brought them all up to the landscape contractors. He brought the joiners in, and they looked at it and went, "There's no way this is going to work. It's not going to work." Now, this would be a great example of how designers and landscapers and contractors really should work. So the landscaper, we're sitting in his yard. They put this, horrible base of a boat at the bottom, which was small, and then this huge crabbing cab from a crabbing unit was put on the top. And they said, "It looks awful. It's never going to work." So as the designer, I walked in and said, "No, guys, listen, right? Give us a bit of wood here." And we screwed a couple of bits of wood in. And I said, "Look, if you elevated the sides up here and made it look bigger than it was, and then we're going to put an outdoor kitchen in here, and we put a sink down the end." And you kind of, all I really did was I kind of delivered the concept just enough to the guys who could deliver it. And whereas they were thinking, from the practical point of view, this doesn't work, this doesn't work. When I showed them a little bit of creative, but I didn't tell them how they were going to do it. I said, "This is the idea. Do you see where I'm going?" And they went, "Oh, I can kind of see it. I can kind of see it. Leave us to it." And I let them do it. And they produced amazing things. So we ended up having a boat with an outdoor kitchen in it. We cooked seafood all day long. It was sitting in a garden in the Phoenix Park. It was, we built a 60-ton stone wall, which was all leaning back at about 14 degrees. So it looked like a stone pier. And this is, bear in mind, this all has to be built in 3 weeks. It lasts for 5 days and then it's thrown in the bin. So the stone wall was actually, I found an old Presbyterian church in Belfast that was being taken apart. I said, I'll buy the stone from it. So we got all the stone. It had moss on it and everything. And with this team of stonemasons, we built all the stone wall. To get it to lean back, you'll appreciate this as a landscaper. I couldn't build a full wall. We didn't have time or budget. So what we did was we actually got those huge concrete blocks, um, and we got shuttering pans, steel concrete shuttering pans, and we leaned them back on it, and we built the whole wall up the shuttering pans. And then, we made a ladder. We rusted it with acid to make it like a rusty ladder, and then I inserted teeny tiny little bits of plants and ferns into it, and all sorts of crazy things. So that's the kind of stuff you have to do if you want to if you really want to do something that's special, you have to go a little bit crazy. But it's also a really, really good example of how a designer and how a landscaper should work together. I mean, it was just such a great combination. I got a gold medal, we got a best in show for that project, but the landscape contractor, they made a special award that year. It was the first year it was introduced, and that was best landscape contractor. And my contractor won it for
Oh,
putting all
awesome.
this stuff together. So it was great as well to see the industry, recognizing the contractors. I mean, it's something that isn't done enough because I think we all need to realize landscapers aren't as good without a really good designer, and a garden designer is completely and utterly useless without a really good landscape contractor. So we need each other, and we should work with each other better. And I think if you can form if you're a landscape contractor and you found it difficult working with a particular garden designer, don't work with that designer. There's other ones out there who you work really well with. Find someone that you get on with, that you trust, and then work with each other on like an equal level. And it's a recipe for success.
Yeah, yeah, that's a perfect example of why how the difference between a designer doing a design and a landscaper doing a design, because the landscapers wouldn't have put that boat like you did in there because they was thinking,
Yeah,
no, it won't work, so we'll do something that's more straightforward, and they just put a more basic one that wouldn't have had the same effect. But
yeah.
I saw that you did it in 2014, 16, 18, and then 20 was COVID, and then you did it in 22. So you were due to do it again this year, but it's happened and you didn't. So are you?
Yeah.
Can you see yourself going back?
Um, I mean, we did the one in 2022 was amazing, because it was supposed to have been done in 2019, and it was cancelled at the last minute because of COVID, and we had everything ready. We'd plants bought the whole lot. So then when it came around again, we were ready to do something. We've been sitting around for 2 years and like went to town on this garden, and this garden really came out well. I was super proud of it. It came out really nice. But I did think to myself, I kind of done all that I can do in Ireland. It was a very high standard garden. It would have been fine pretty much at any show anywhere in the world. But I just, I have a family and everything here, and I wasn't sure whether I wanted to go and do any of the UK shows. I kind of feel that really my next show garden, if I do one, should be in the UK.
I thought
Ideally, I'd like to have a crack at Chelsea
I thought
or
you were going to say
Australia.
Melbourne. You following
Well,
following Peter Donovan's
I
footsteps.
there you go. I'd love to do Melbourne show. I have two projects on at the moment in Perth at the moment. Ocean Reef and Perth have two beautiful gardens I've designed there, all completely remotely. But I'm due a visit fairly
Disappointing.
soon. Yeah, I'd love to do the Melbourne show. I mean, like, there's some lovely work. Do you know what I'll show you? Actually, one of my favorite books and a very big influence on me. I got to pull it out here. I'm sure you know it only too well.
I do, yeah. Yeah, but I loved
Yeah.
that book early on too.
Fantastic book, Dean Harold. I mean, a beautiful, beautiful book showing incredible gardens. It was quite influential in me because, you know, in Australia, you've got that fantastic outdoor climate. You can put swimming pools in, you can do whatever you want. It's going to get used all the time. In Ireland, you've got to convince people to go outside. It's cold. I don't know, it's 1 degree Celsius there at the moment. There's frost on the ground as I'm speaking to you now. And you could have a wet summer where it rains the whole time. So how do you convince people to spend hundreds of thousands of euro on their gardens? Well, you've got to create something that makes them want to go outside. I love Dean's book because, he had that outdoor living thing, and I wanted to get people outside. So we kind of did the same thing, but we added heaters. That was basically it. We added heaters, but we got that same ethos of, yeah, I want to sit outside, throw on a coat, stick on a heater, light the fire, and it's awesome. It's amazing. So yeah, very, very
Yeah.
important. So Melbourne, sure, there's a thought, yeah.
And the last question for you, Andrew, is who do you think would be a good guest to have on the podcast?
Ooh, good guest to have on the podcast. I don't know who you've already had. Have you ever spoken to Mark Gregory?
No. Well, I
Okay,
had
so
Gareth Wilson. I've had Gareth Wilson has been on.
oh, well,
And
Gareth Wilson. No, I don't know. So, I would recommend Mark Gregory. He's a landscaper he's one of the judges at the Bloom show. He's also, I think he's got 70 or 80 gold medals at Chelsea for building gardens. So, I mean, the extent of his knowledge is phenomenal, and the extent of his experience. A good guy to talk to, a nice guy too. Real landscaper too. Even though he's a designer and he's designed plenty of gardens, but he'll never lose his landscaping roots. That garden that I saw, that we talked about in 2018. It was a beautiful garden, put all this effort in. It's obviously very forward facing. You don't want to see what's behind the garden, like all hell breaks loose. But I'm looking from a distance and I can see there's 9 judges walking around the garden, and they're all looking at it. And next thing I see, shit, they're all walking around the back of the garden. And of course, Mark Gregory is leading them around the back of the garden because he needs to know how have you got the 60-ton wall leaning back at that angle. I thought that was funny because that's the mindset of a landscaper. You need to know how does it work.
yeah.
And it was really good. So yeah, he's a good guy to try.
Awesome. I'll definitely message him because I've been following him for a while, so that'll be a good one. But thank you so much for coming on. Absolutely loved having this chat, and I could have gone on for another hour and a half or so. So thank you for coming on and sharing your story.
Absolute pleasure. So look, when will I see you in Melbourne?
Ne Next year or year after.
Excellent. I'll meet you there. Hey, any chance you'd build it, would you?
I've built some in the past, but I decided I'll only build my own ones because the designer
Yeah,
gets
good plan.
credit. So
Yeah, exactly. I don't blame you. Great to meet you, Joe.
thanks, Andrew.